Chapter 1. You are listening at FameTV.info. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios Talent. Ordinary, Enlightenment. Ordinary, Temperament. Ordinary, Life History. Ordinary, Innate Ability. Ordinary, Overall Evaluation. Ordinary. Looking at his evaluation form in the sect, Shenran could not help but shake his head helplessly. Ordinary, everything was ordinary. It was no wonder that the sect wanted to send him to the servant quarters to become a servant disciple. Sigh, in my previous life, I was just mediocre, accomplishing nothing. I didn't expect that I would have already transmigrated. Everyone else is just showing off their ambitions and skills, but when it comes to me, I'm just an ordinary person, obliterated from everyone. Shenran put down the form in his hand and sighed softly, although there was nothing bad about being an ordinary person, since he had already transmigrated. Who wouldn't want to achieve great things and become a powerhouse who could move mountains and fill the seas, seize the moon, and pluck the stars, with a breath of vital energy? He felt like the rapid wind that could travel 1,000 miles. It was the dream of many. Half a month ago, Shenran transmigrated to this fantasy world and became a disciple of the 9th Hall of the Empyrean Sword Sect. Before he could rejoice, he received the results of the Triennial Sect Assessment. In this assessment report, it clearly showed that he was only an extremely ordinary person who had barely passed the assessment. There were many disciples of this level in the Empyrean Sword Sect, and he was definitely not within their consideration. Therefore, he was naturally eliminated by the Empyrean Sword Sect. He would be sent to the servant quarters and become a servant disciple. In this cruel world where talent determined how far one could go, this also meant that Shenran's future could be seen at a glance. Tomorrow would be a repeat of today, and it would go on until 100 years later when he died of old age in the servant's office. Then, like many senior servants, he would be casually thrown away and buried in a mountain outside the Empyrean Sword Sect. From then on, he would be accompanied by insects and mudstones, and Shenran would no longer be in this world. Earth to earth, dust to dust, forget it. If it is predestined that you have it in your life, you will have it, but if it isn't predestined, do not push it. After sighing and comforting himself, Shenran started to pack his luggage and planned to report to the servant quarters. Ding. Modifying voiceover introduction system loading. Modified voiceover introduction system loading successful. Note 1. The host will see the voiceover introduction of everything in the world and have the opportunity to modify them. The voiceover introduction modified by the host will be mapped into reality. Note 2. The first time you install this system, you will be given 3 chances to modify the voiceover introduction. The modification of the voiceover introduction cannot be used to directly modify cultivation. Note 3. The voiceover introduction after the modification is logical and reasonable. Suddenly, a cold notification sounded in his mind. Yes, suddenly, Shenran suddenly raised his head, his eyes shining brightly. Modified the voiceover introduction system. The golden finger is here. In his previous life, Shenran, who was familiar with online literature, knew that his golden finger had awakened. He just didn't know. What the hell is this modification of the voiceover introduction system? As he hesitated, he looked at the sword he had placed on the table. Immediately, a voiceover introduction that only he could see appeared in front of him. This is an extremely ordinary iron sword. There's nothing eye-catching about it. It's ordinary. Do you want to modify the voiceover introduction? Note. Currently, the host can modify the voiceover introduction x3. Looking at the voiceover introduction, Shenran only thought for a moment and understood. In other words, I can edit and modify the voiceover introduction of this iron sword. For example, if he modified the voiceover introduction of this iron sword into the #1 divine sword in the world, would this ordinary iron sword become the #1 divine sword in the world? In an instant, Shenran smiled broadly. Good God! If his imagination was big enough, wouldn't he be invincible? This was purely a test of imagination. In this world, the most important thing in cultivation is talent. A day of cultivation for a talented expert is equivalent to 100 days for ordinary people. Then, a smile appeared on Shenran's face as he slowly turned to look at himself in the mirror. Immediately, a line of voiceover introduction appeared. this is an ordinary young man who was born ordinary. If nothing unexpected happens, he will live an ordinary life. Come and read on our website Wuxia World site. Thanks. Looking at the ordinary word in the introduction, Shen Ran did not look disappointed at all. Instead, he looked as if he had expected it. Indeed, if nothing unexpected happened, he would live a mediocre life like countless seniors who had been sent to the servant quarters. Then, he would die and wither, turning into dust. Phew. Shen Ran took a deep breath, and the divine light in his eyes began to flicker violently. System, modify the voiceover. Instantly, all the voiceover introductions about him were cleared and displayed as pending input. Without any hesitation, Shen Ran began to type in the voiceover. This is a young man born with the bones of a supreme being. He possesses the Pangu sacred body. Pangu means creator of the universe in Chinese mythology, that is immune to the corrosion of curses, and the ancient immortal eyes that can see through the supreme techniques of the world. His talent is 1 in a million, and it is world-shaking. He was born to cultivate the Tao, and he came to face the calamity. He is destined to rule the ages alone. He will sweep through all enemies in the future, and kill until no one in the world dares to call himself supreme. With a crackling sound, Shen Ran copied the narrations from the templates of the male elites in previous life and filled them in his own voiceover introduction. Shen Ran only stopped after writing for half an hour. He rubbed his chin and nodded in satisfaction at the voiceover introduction, which was like an essay. Is that reasonable? Yes, it is. Shen Ran smiled silently, then collected his thoughts and said, System, generate a new voiceover introduction. Ding. Voiceover introduction in progress. Ding. Voiceover introduction completed. In an instant, Shen Ran's entire body and soul began to tremble. His entire body began to change shockingly. Every bone in his body emitted a dazzling golden light. Mysterious patterns appeared on every one of his bones, like runes written by the heavens. A transformation. All the bones in his body were transforming towards the supreme bone. The supreme bone contained endless potential. As long as a person had a supreme bone, it meant that their leveling speed was 100 times faster than others, and on the way to leveling up, there were no limits. There was once a human emperor who became one of the 10 strongest experts in the world in just 300 years because he had a supreme bone in his body. With the supreme bone, he had the foundation to become a supreme. It could be said that he was destined to be a supreme. At this moment, the 300 bones in Shen Ran's body were all transforming into supreme bones. How appalling was that! This meant that as long as he did not die early, he would definitely become the supreme ruler of heaven and earth in less than 50 years and overlook the sun, the moon, and the stars. It was known that the 10 strongest cultivators of the human race had cultivated for at least 300 years before they obtained top-notch strength. From this moment on, Shen Ran would no longer be an ordinary person who would achieve nothing for the rest of his life. Boom. 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 In the next moment, the blood in his entire body suddenly boiled, like a surging river wave colliding with a reef, emitting a muffled bang. Immediately after, strands of scarlet hair grew out of his pores with impurities before falling off. His blood turned from red to hot gold. This was the awakening of the Pangu sacred body. There were 3,000 holy bodies in the human race, and the Pangu sacred body was number 1. It was also known as the strongest human constitution. As long as you had the Pangu sacred body, it meant that your physical body was incomparably powerful and invincible among your peers. After mastering it, one could achieve a unique and unrivaled strongest physical body. Even with just his physical strength, he was invincible in the world. In the history of mankind before that, only 2 people had awakened the Pangu sacred body, and when they were alive, both of them were the strongest cultivators in the world at that time. Unmatched. At this moment, the Pangu sacred body, which had only appeared twice in the tens of thousands of years of human history, had awakened in Shen Ran's body. Rumble. A blood chi furnace suddenly appeared in Shen Ran's body. The monstrous blood chi formed a pillar that passed through his body and dashed to the sky like a beacon, piercing through the world. The Pangu sacred body was awakening. Behind him, 6 great phenomena appeared, reflecting the 9th heaven, the highest of the heavens, and rotating the cycle of reincarnation. The great immortal overlooked the 9th heaven. The sea of bitterness planted green lotus yin and yang life and death diagram. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Sight only the stars shone brightly. These phenomena would only appear in the world when someone with infinite potential was born. At the end of these 6 phenomena, they could evolve into the 6 paths of reincarnation fist that could dominate the world and crush the ancient era. And this was far from over. Listen to the full novel at FameTV.info, direct link in the description.